Welcome back to the Schools Out podcast. We don't know if that's the actual name, but that's what we're calling it for now. We talk about how learning happens outside of school. And today I'm sitting with Laini Liberti. And Laini is an author, speaker, community leader, radically unschooling mom. We'll have to have her just explain what that means to her. Teen coach and alternative education advocate who helped to spearhead the thriving world schooling movement. And I just have to mention, like, I am all about the idea of world schooling, but I'm not a traveler. I see people world schooling. I'm like, that looks awesome for you guys. I'm going to stay home and look at your pictures. So thanks for sitting with me today, Laini. I really appreciate it.
Oh, I'm so happy to be here. You're such a joy to follow on Twitter. So I'm really glad to be able to contribute a different voice to this.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
I appreciate that. Now, can you recall how long we've been connected there? I know I've seen your name recently, but I don't know how long it's been.
I have no clue. I go through
It's fine.
phases where I'm active on Twitter and then I forget about it for a year and then I go back on. It just depends. We probably were connected, I would say, several years.
Oh, you think so? Okay.
They're farther down on my list than some of the other people. And, I've got almost 8,000 followers. So people have
Mm-hmm.
followed me for, quite a while in different, stages of my life. Who knows?
Yep. Well, tell us.
To be here.
That's awesome. Yeah, we're happy to have you. Tell us a little bit about your unschooling story. Where did this all start for you? And we'll go from there.
Yikes. Okay. I've told this story many times. It is an interesting story, but I don't think it's as unique anymore. But so to premise it, 12 years ago, I'm from California. The economy crashed. And as a single parent, I decided at that time I was going to make a change. I shut my business and I, had this really amazing evening with my son in the office late one night. And I said to him, his name is Miro. I said, Miro, let's get rid of all this stuff and let's just go have an adventure. And things were happening in my business. My clients were going away, my bread and butter clients. I was overstressed, single parent, not seeing my child. And he was like, I'm in, all in, let's do this. And then the second question was, do I have to go to school? I said, no, of course not. Let's go have an adventure. And in my heart, intuitively, I knew that at that time he would have gone into fifth grade. That fifth grade had nothing on, traveling for a year with our backpacks and sort of just going in the direction based on inspiration. We had, a direction in mind, and that was south. We were starting from California, we were heading south. There was so much to see and do and discover and learn, not only about the outer worlds, but I was really looking forward to reconnecting and getting into, these grand concepts that I had always read about, like being present in your own life and having a strong relationship with your child, right? I mean, because I believed that I had that, but I just didn't have time for that. And that to me really at that point became that priority. So we set out in early 2008, economy crash 2008. We left early 2009. And that journey became life-changing for us. It has been 12 years and still haven't returned. So I ended up raising my child on the road traveling, and that became a combination of like an educational journey, a journey into self, journey into relationship, journey into who we are in the world, a journey into looking at world views. And then of course my son at the time was 9, just turning 10. But during that whole period, he moved into his adolescence. So it was a journey into learning about the teenage brain, healing, self-directed healing, all this stuff encompassed our journey over the last 12 years. And it's weird that I'm sitting here at the, tail end. He's going to be 22 pretty soon now. Like I
Mhm.
have gone through that. So I am like entering a whole new stage in my parenting.
Mhm.
The parent with the empty nest, the parent who has gone through this amazing journey, but the journey itself has become something that created purpose in both of our lives. So we still work together. And I'll tell you some of the stuff that we do, but it's all as a result of what we defined as being in partnership, our partnership paradigm in parenting, schooling, family culture. All this stuff really became solidified as we were on the road. And guess
Hmm.
what? We had time. Like, we had time, and we were together for 24/7 for like almost 12 years. And that's pretty crazy. And I was really, really clear about being intentional about all those different aspects. But to go back to your original question, like, how did you get into unschooling?
Mhm.
About a year into our travels, or it was about 8 months into our travels, my son said to me, well, before we set out, one of the agreements that we made together was, number one, we're going to be in partnership. So we're going to make decisions together. And
Mm.
number two, we're going to say yes to every opportunity that comes in our way. Of course, we're going to be safe and practice
Mhm.
safe boundaries and all that stuff, but yes to adventure, and yes to things that may come in front of us, like opportunities or ideas or inspiration. And we're just going to do it, right? Instead of letting fear be the dominant emotion, controlling
Mhm.
or what we deemed as responsibility and all that other stuff. So about 8 months in, my son said to me, knowing this and practicing this, Mom, can we just do this forever? So I had to say yes. And I
Yeah.
did. And that was the point where I said, okay, if we're going to do this, I was on board for 1 year of no school because I always believed education was important. Like I bought into that whole story. Education's important. It's somebody else's
Mhm.
job to educate my child. 1 year of travel will be fine for fifth grade, but now
Mhm.
I have to, as the responsible adult, the parent, make a decision about how we together we're going to approach education. And so I said to him, let me do some research, and then we're going to talk about what education is going to look like. And that
Mm.
took me down a rabbit hole. I discovered the writings of, some of the greats, John Taylor Gatto, John Holt, and I can never say his name. Illich. Oh, I can't say it.
Oh, yes, yeah. Ivan Illich.
Ivan Illich, yeah.
Or maybe it's even, or I think it's
Yeah,
pronounced Ivan, yeah.
Ivan.
Illich.
Anyway, so I started diving into these subjects, and then
Mm.
noticed that there were communities on Facebook. And at the time, there were like mail message groups, and I just got involved and was like, oh my God, there's this thing called unschooling. And guess what?
Mhm.
We're already doing it. And it's
Yeah.
virtual learning. And it's, and then when I got deeper, I realized that the thing that we were doing, the partnership paradigm that we had agreed to about finances, about journey, about direction,
Mhm.
about all that stuff was at the foundation of what radical unschooling was. And I was like, dude, yeah, that was a long-winded way to answer your
That's great.
question.
I appreciate it. So I'm going to use an agriculture metaphor because I think it makes sense. How when you learned about unschooling, you figured out we were already doing this. What in your life do you feel like prepared the ground for that unschooling to grow? Does that make sense?
Well, part of what brought me to that spot, like 8 months into our travels, I didn't know it, but we were already in the process of deschooling.
Yeah,
And,
deschooling, right.
and I had come from the background of working in marketing and advertising for 18 years. So that's what I left behind. I closed my agency.
Okay.
And I was very articulate and aware of the consumerist lifestyle. And one
Mm-hmm.
of the things that I prepared my son with when he was very young was, media literacy. We would always talk about advertising. We would talk about framing. We would talk about, logical fallacies. We would talk about
Mm-hmm.
emotional, you know, manipulation and that sort of
Yeah.
thing. So he was raised with that awareness. And so
Yeah.
because we had that kind of dialogue, and also, okay, so I'm going to admit to you, I was a punk rocker.
Me
So,
too.
right. So, like, there's some of that rebellion in the,
Mm-hmm.
in the advertising world. I identified with the term, I was a disruptor. And so maybe that kind of, I don't know if I was born that way or if
Mm-hmm.
that's something I learned and was open to. But the main thing that got me really on board with the education unschooling path was
Mm-hmm.
the reframing in my mind the term education and replacing that with learning. And the more that I learned
Mm-hmm.
about the process of the biological process, the brain development, and what we did as learners, I realized that this thing that's packaged and called education that I once revered and thought it was the greatest thing in the world, it was an illusion, just like the kinds of illusions that I was creating in the advertising world, right? So it was a packaged idea. And in essence, what it was doing was indoctrinating and getting people used to bells and routines and being told what to do. And then the realization that, I mean, I'm sounding kind of activist here, but I guess there's a part
It's
of me
okay.
that is that
Mm-hmm.
realizing that the education system doesn't really support creativity, problem solving, and the things that I really value as a human being. Like these are the things that I wanted my son
Mm-hmm.
to have. I wanted him to be, able to solve problems. I wanted him to be, supported in creative endeavors and creative thought and creative expression. And I really wanted him to adapt a deep level of learning. And none of those things were present in his instruction in formal school. So the, sort of framing it through like John Taylor Gatto or last two names mixed up, but understanding the perspective from a teacher in the education system and how they were trying to shape young minds was
Mm-hmm.
not congruent with what I desired for my child. And this was somebody who was actually putting it into words for me. I'd never even thought of it before.
Yeah.
Just, I never questioned. It was just education is important and it's somebody else's job to do this thing called educating my child because, of course, I'm a good parent.
Yeah, and I think I want to extend that idea. It's their job because we assume that the child won't and or can't do it on their own.
Until you discover that they can.
Exactly.
And that blows that box wide open.
Yeah. Wide open. I mean, I can just remember that so vividly when our only child at the time was 12 months old, and we had read about just spending time thoughtfully observing your child. And it was supposed to be just like an experiment, like do it for 5 minutes and see what they do. And 45 minutes later, we were just, we had no idea that an infant was capable, he wasn't even walking yet, was capable to entertain themselves so fully for so long. I mean, it blew. And I was a teacher in elementary education at the time. I knew about constructivist theories in education. Like I knew about child-led learning, but it's like there was still part of me that wasn't getting it. So talk to me a little bit about the way you describe it. There was already, from what I can tell, a very special relationship between you and your son. When did that change happen, or was that a change? And if whether it was or a change or not, can you talk about sort of where that came from, where the relationship was already ready to do this adventure together? Because I think about a lot of just everyday parents, and I think I include myself in that. Some people think I'm a weird parent, but just everyday parents, we're not going to get in an RV and just start traveling around with one kid, just me and one kid. We feel like we need more space than that or something. But it seemed like you two had the relationship, some kind of relationship already, that you were prepared to do that together. So talk to me a little bit about that, if
Sure.
that makes sense.
Yeah, it does make sense. Well, that was a relationship that I spent a lot of time cultivating first. And this is
Mm-hmm.
going to sound cliche, in myself, right? So
Mm-hmm.
I come from, I told you punk rock. Well, that was
Mm-hmm.
also rebellion. That was a lot of trauma in my adolescence. There was a lot of sort of really self-sabotaging behaviors. I was really unhappy. I never felt seen or heard when I was a teen. And there was a lot, and I had a disorganized attachment style growing up. So there's a
Mm-hmm.
lot going on there. And before I became a parent, I made it my mission to understand and heal. Not,
Yeah.
I don't want to say like I'm better, but like have a deeper understanding of self and recognize when, triggers happen and patterns come up. I really wanted to understand and how to create the secure attachment within myself so I could be a secure attachment parent, right? Like, so
Mm-hmm.
I read everything I could about attachment parenting. From my mid 20s to mid 30s, I was on a healing journey, and that to me was my mission. And so when I had my son, I was in my 30s already, and I raised him with according to quote unquote attachment theory, which is crazy that I had never heard of unschooling, because I was primed attachment parent, breastfeeding, natural birth, all that stuff.
Yeah.
But then it never went into homeschooling or anything like that.
Yeah.
So having that kind of intention from the beginning, and really creating the space for open dialogue, and we spoke about everything. And one of the things that I never did with my son, but I will with other babies, oh, this is so
Mm-hmm.
terrible to admit, that was baby talk, or speak to them with the,
Mm-hmm.
oh, you're so cute. I always spoke to him with a very, I mean, my voice is pretty animated anyway,
Yeah, it is.
adults, but I never did baby talking. I would always answer in real full sentences and use,
Mm.
would speak to him as if he was an adult. And when he didn't understand, I'd, sort of simplify it for him. And his ability to connect and communicate verbally was so strong,
Mhm.
just throughout his entire childhood. And that was the pattern that we had set. There was that dialogue. I always made time to sit and look him in the eye and talk and reflect and download and all that stuff. I just didn't have a whole lot of time to do anything with him because I worked so much, and that was his
Yeah.
complaint. So that was there, and he would say to me, Mom, you're always working, you never have any time for me. And that
Mm-hmm.
kind of heartbreak, like, I'm doing this for us, I'm doing this because like I'm a single parent, and if I don't do it, who else is going to do it? Like, we got to do this, like,
Yeah.
I have to do. So shifting that paradigm, but hearing him say those words, I wanted to match those words with a gesture that let him know that he was heard, that let him know that he was understood. And our original goal to leave for 1 year, well, that didn't sound like a sacrifice. That sounded like the biggest joy in my life. I
Mm-hmm.
honor. So I don't know. I mean, some parents may look at it as a task. I really stepped into parenting, it's something I really wanted to do. And my being a parent was also about me healing me. So
Mm-hmm.
there was a lot of, I'm taken from this relationship too, because this is the next part of my journey. And, yeah, we're selfish because we're humans, but that just happens to be it. And I don't know if you'll hear anybody else say that, because most parents will say, oh, my children, I'll sacrifice everything for them. No, I'm getting from this relationship too. I'm healing a lot of that past trauma.
Here's what I hear you saying is in those early attachment times, I think my understanding or my experience with other attachment parents has been that attachment parenting is a method. And when they're with their infant, they provide the breast, they snuggle all the time, but they do these things almost begrudgingly. It's like, this is how you attachment parent. Now, remember, I'm from Indiana, so we're a little bit different breed here. But that's what I noticed. And so it got kind of a bad taste in my mouth. Like, I don't think we're attachment parenting, because we're not that way, because we were all about enjoying and sharing the relationship, even though we were making mistakes as well. But what I hear you saying is that the essence of attachment parenting for you was that you shared these things with your child, and you used that word earlier. So snuggling, it wasn't a way to create a certain kind of child. You actually, like, you shared this experience with the baby. And so it was never a begrudgingly offered thing. It was just, this is how we live life right now. And so when he started walking, you shared that less together, and then you shared walking together. And then
Exactly.
when he started reading, you shared reading together. You didn't read to him. Well, you probably did before he knew how to read, but it wasn't like, oh, I'm going to read this to you because you need the reading. It's, let's read something together. Am I painting that picture clear enough?
Yes, you described the attachment perfectly. And I did it because it was the joy of doing it. I love
Yeah.
doing that. But I
Yeah.
did want to tell you just quickly a funny story. The first time my son read was he read a karaoke on my computer because he loved the
Oh,
song Shout from Tears for Fears and he wanted to sing it. So I put it on the computer and we went along with it. So it wasn't a book, it was Tears for
that's
Fears. Yeah,
awesome.
that's how he learned how to read.
That's so great. Well, and I know a lot of kids, especially in unschooling, because we allow them to read in the way that makes sense to them, is they learn to read watching video games or reading comic books, things that they're not supposed to read, and I'm noticing as we're having some of these conversations with parents, and this is the whole reason for doing, is like, it's helping me look at my own practice and how often I get into formalizing things too quickly and saying, oh, this is the method for how I do things now, which, it's probably part of my upbringing a little bit, but that's what I love about these conversations is it's helping me look at it from a different perspective. Not that you're saying, well, the way that you're doing it is wrong and you need to do it my way. It's just, here's how I think about being with my children. It's all about the joy together. And where sometimes I get that and I'm totally, you know, I'll give extra time if it's something that I want to do too. If it's a game that they want to play that I don't really want to play, I'm like, I can do this for about 5 more minutes and then I'm done.
I gotta tell you, I have watched hour upon hour, hours, hundreds of hours of Minecraft. I'm so glad he's out of that phase. Let me tell you.
Is it because he asked you to, or did you feel an obligation to be there?
So he asked,
Or
Mom, let
yeah,
me show you this. I'm building this thing and I'm doing this thing. Yeah, let me show you this.
it's only going to take me 3 hours, but I would like it if you stayed here the whole time.
Oh my God, I'm so glad that phase is over. But I did it. I did it because it brought joy to him. And that to me was
Yeah.
part of that partnership. And we got to really put into practice the words, right? Because the concept of being in partnership is a pretty big one, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that made sense for us before we started to travel. And as we started to travel, we had all of these foundational agreements that we both came up with, right? I wasn't in charge of anything. He wasn't in charge of
Mm-hmm.
anything. It had to be, we had to decide things together. Our budgets were our budgets, our travel, our spending, our journeys. And when he needed downtime to play video games, we had downtime. And so that we had this partnership. And then it extended into the learning, especially as he got older. And that became
Mm-hmm.
really fascinating. And I could talk about that if you want to go in that direction.
And I know you sent me your website too, which I haven't had a chance to take a look at. Or
I
maybe
have
it's
a
the
bunch.
Partnership Parent website is that one of your main ones?
Yeah, well, I've got a bunch of them. So,
Okay.
I've my son and I created a business together when he was 14.
Hmm.
And then from that business, I developed another business in 2020, which was online. I mean, I could tell you about that. It just depends on where you want to take the conversation.
Yeah. I'm definitely going to include the links in the show notes. And
Okay.
then maybe after the conversation, we should kind of figure out where the conversation should go next, because I definitely have an interest in helping other creators like yourself get the word out more, but also interested in figuring out how I can be an advocate for other parents. I just wrote down this morning that one of my goals with my content is to reach the people who wouldn't normally look for parenting content, because I want to find those people who they trust their gut, but they haven't taken the time to heal from their own wounds. So the gut's pretty messy. And, just like we're seeing in the medical world that, a lot more doctors are talking about the gut biome now. It's like we have this whole mental gut biome that we're following our hearts. We think we're following our instincts as a parent, but we're actually following our authoritarian upbringing. And that's going to be, I think, a tough nut to crack. With you having a marketing mindset, maybe we have some conversations we can have about that, about how do we reach someone who kind of doesn't want to be reached, or they think they don't want to be reached to an extent.
Well, from a marketing perspective, you know that the way that you reach people is you meet them at their pain point.
Yeah.
Where is it that it's coming up in their lives that they're having a problem, and you offer a solution. You acknowledge
Yeah.
that you see them in that pain point and you offer a path for solution. And then you get into some other marketing and it's about the transformation or the
Yeah.
results, all that other stuff. But if you can reach parents where they're hurting most, and a lot of parents that I work primarily with teens, by the way, but I do a
Yeah.
little bit of work. Like 1/3 of my work is with parents, but the majority of my work is with teens.
Yeah.
But the parents that I work with are, first, they see the problem in their partner, their relationship with their partner, or their relationship with their child, or both. And then that boils down to discongruent family culture.
Hmm.
And most of the time, they're starting to look at the problem outside of themselves, and it's really easy to recognize that this relationship is not working, or my child is not, quote unquote, behaving in a manner in which I want him to behave, which,
Mm-hmm.
by the way, is the problem. Like coercing your child to behave in a way that you want him to behave is the problem.
Mm-hmm.
But that's the pain point. And from a marketing perspective, that's where you can identify that they're struggling. if they're ready to look at another potential way of approaching parenting and education, because both of those things go hand in hand. Once you become a partnership parent or an unschooling parent or self-directed parent or an attachment parent or a peaceful parent, I mean, there's so many words to really talk about. Conscious parent, I've heard before. You automatically start recognizing the authoritarian paradigm that you're talking about is where the problem is. And it's not your fault. You were raised, indoctrinated into a school system, raised in a culture that is all about listening to authority.
Yeah.
Fear around that. So of course you're going to bring that into your parenting because you're human. This is the saturation that, your programming that you've gotten. So creating space for the recognition, the looking at, wow, we're really functioning in an authoritarian paradigm. Do we have to exist in this system, or can we choose to heal ourselves and heal our families? And I think that is the greatest step towards creating a new, like world peace, or creating a new culture that we want to see birthed.
Yeah. And most of these new kind of approaches or new ways of seeing things often come after big crises. That's where it kind of came to a head for you. I can remember, did you ever remember hearing about, oh, now I'm going to completely lose the name. It's not Montessori. It's the town in Italy that, why can't I think of this?
Montessori is Italian.
Yes, it is. But this was not Montessori. It was somewhat related because Montessori was more kindergarten up through like first, second grade. This was like daycare type stuff. And it's right on the tip of my tongue. It starts with an R.
Starts with an R. I don't know.
I'll think of it later. But there is a town. Gosh, it's right there. There is a town that after World War II, the community kind of looked at this and themselves and said, what can we do about this? Like, we raised like all of these people who were in the war and driving the war were like went to school. So how do we get out of this? And they, developed a new language for how they were talking about children and development. And it's become very influential. And of course, I can't remember the name of it. I learned about it in college.
Oh my gosh. And it's crazy. I don't know because I've studied so much about alternative education.
And you'll probably recognize it. I'm just going to take a break here and see if I can find it.
Steiner, of course. You're not talking about Steiner, right?
No, not Steiner. I don't even know what to search for. That's how
put it in the show notes. You'll find it after we finish.
Yeah, I will find it. It's driving me nuts. I keep wanting to say Rousseau. I know it's not Rousseau.
Oh.
You think you got it, don't you? You think you know what I'm talking about?
Charlotte Mason?
No. Gosh, it's going to come to me any minute. Let's talk about one more question. I really like this. If someone was talking to you before they became a parent and they were worried that they might mess things up, is there a story that you feel like you would come to mind and try to encourage them with a story? Like, what story would you tell? If someone came to you, and if I came to you and I said, we want to have a child, but we're really worried about messing this whole like parenting thing up. And so you're probably going to start with advice first, but then you're going to illustrate that advice with something that happened in your life, probably. What story would that be? Other people are having trouble with this question as well.
It's a good question.
Because you would tell one,
Oh,
but
yeah.
it doesn't come to mind yet.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. I mean, I suppose I would start off by saying that the journey with yourself, the relationship and the knowledge that you have with yourself is so important to your parenting, right?
Hmm.
So, getting your house in order and understanding your triggers and your belief system. And instead of living a rules-based life, choose to live a values-based life. Therefore,
Hmm.
rules which become arbitrary, like you must go do this until you're this age. Like that's an arbitrary rule. Instead of rules, really sort of start repatterning your own life to live a values-based life. And then I would look at your own childhood and see what that gave you. Some people had great childhoods, some people not so great, like me. Those that have trauma in their past, they really need to take a look at that. And
Hmm.
then when it comes to parenting, allow yourself to make mistakes, but also allow yourself the humility of repairing when you make mistakes. And
Yeah.
also recognize that what you do, the way that you model what your values are way more important than what you say. Hopefully that would be just a little bit of insight. Now I didn't give you a story. Oh God, I've
It's
got
hard, isn't
stories.
it? I know.
But they're like all travel stories and, like great epiphanies and trust and all this, decision making, all that stuff. Yes, okay, maybe not the story, but what I would say is start to put your focus and attention on what people call the soft skills. Because if
Hmm.
you're going to follow through and put your children into public education, it doesn't address that at all. And the soft
Hmm.
skills are things like grit and resilience, and cooperation and collaboration, recognizing consent, autonomy, trust, logic, decision making, creativity,
Hmm.
like all that stuff is, what you can give to your child. And as long as you value that, and as long as you lead your life as somebody who does those things, who practices, and then taking the time to share, I just made this decision because, you know, my reasoning was this, the choices I had was this, and then ask your
Hmm.
child, what do you think? What do you think? How would you have made the decision?
Hmm.
Yeah,
Yeah.
powerful.
Awesome. Well, I know we could talk about this for a long time, and I appreciate the time you've given so far. So I'll put your websites, at least the ones you sent me. If you have
Okay.
more, you can always send more. I'll put those in the show notes, and I can't wait to listen to this again. It's going to be hard to edit some of this stuff down because there's just so much good conversation
Yeah.
coming out of this. So thanks again, Lainey. I look forward to, I hope we talk again soon,
Oh, so true.
and you have a fantastic rest of your day.
Thank you. You too.